Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to a researcher, Gregory Taylor, who has some information in reference to African American literacy, and he's given us quite a bit of information in reference to his own personal background and his own experiences dealing with literacy. And Professor Taylor, let's pick up where we left off, and to give you an opportunity to now talk about African American literacy and why African Americans are having difficult times in terms of reading and literacy in a real sense.
Yes. Dr. Haney, when I got started, learning to read, as I said earlier, my mother taught me to read, but made me feel guilty when I couldn't pronounce the word. So I took that thinking to school. And in the first grade, when we would read, I remember I was always compared to another little fellow in the class. And if we messed up, you got put in from the A group back in the F group from reading the embarrassment in the classroom. And when you couldn't make a sound of a word, you didn't know phonics, the kids would laugh at you. So you have all of these things in your memory when it comes to trying to learn in school. And having spoken at a lot of literacy agencies in Atlanta, a lot of the other kids would share these things too. And recently, about a year ago, Dr. Sylvester Gates spoke at Tennessee State University. And during his informal setting, we got a chance to question him. And what I remember most was he said that he's on the President Education Committee, President Obama Education Committee, and he said they told President Obama that this present workforce today is not equipped to prepare the kids for the 21st century. And he said that they must learn how the children learn and then teach them from that perspective, not to try to get them to learn from the way they have learned. And that really stuck with me because the book that I've written called Unrefined Thoughts for Thinking, it's designed to capture those unrefined thoughts because I believe all of us were illiterate at one time or have unrefined thoughts in our head. And if we could use those, and give you an example of one, when I was in the third grade, we had to a book to read. And when you finish reading the paragraph the teacher asked you to read, the teacher would say, "Did you comprehend that?" And I say, "Comprehend?" I said, "I wonder what the world that is." I thought some smoke was going to appear between my face and the book. And the kids get a great joy out of me opening up and sharing the way that I thought incorrectly in reference to but I never would have said that when I was in school, because the kids would laugh at me and different things of that nature. But it's things like this. And in one of the classes that I was speaking in, I'll never forget, a seventh grader at the Bunch Middle School in Atlanta, this young lady told me they would write a paragraph, and she told me afterwards, she said, Mr. Taylor, she said, I had stopped learning because I was not learning like other kids in the classroom. And she said, now that I've heard your presentation, she said, I realize the little that I have learned, I can add something to that and grow from that. And so that's what I'm getting at here when I say unrefined thoughts for thinking, for learning. We have unrefined thoughts in our memory. In the book, I make mention of scratch paper, scratch thoughts, like when you do your taxes. You throw away the scratch paper. You don't need it. But in our memory, I remember I interviewed teachers in the school system, bookstore owners in Atlanta, and the principal of a school. And he told me that the method that I was using, unrefined thoughts for thinking, for learning, brought his memory, took him back to when he was learning. So in all of our memories, there are some thoughts that we have that are unrefined. And I believe if we use those to connect them to those who are totally illiterate, the functionally illiterate, and then the literate, we can connect there. That's what the book have in mind, to do. And it's exciting to see, their reaction and making them feel comfortable. And I spoke to one group of men in Atlanta between the age of 40 and 50 years old. And they told me that they will not share their unrefined thoughts for learning with teachers if they make them feel uncomfortable, or if they feel like it will embarrass them, or if they would laugh at them. But I have found that a lot of those who are functionally illiterate, they have created new methods for which they are learning. And this brings to mind what Dr. Sylvester Gates said. He's a physicist at the University of Maryland, that we must learn the way the kids are learning and then use that to assist them in the way that they need to go.
In order to teach them,
that's
you have
right.
to learn that.
Learn that first. And it's totally different from what it used to be, that they need to learn that. And to give you another example, I heard the CEO of Mahari, new CEO Webb, say that HMO is out and that the HCO is in terms of healthcare, and in the church, the contemporary music is out, and what's in now is the old music to get back to that. And I connect all these things together. I see how they are, connected, and things along those lines,
Very good. And so in a real sense, we have to work at teaching. Teaching does not come automatically to some children.
Yes, that's true. And also, I knew early on that I was going to have to teach myself. And one of the other things that I was concerned about, I was given a lot growing up. I had 4 older sisters. One was a teacher, 2 were nurses, X-ray technician. And so these individuals did a lot for me in terms of giving a lot of things to me, getting and buying a lot of things for me. But all along, I knew that what I didn't have, one day I was going to have to get it for myself. And so that conditioned me to learn to teach myself, and I believe in self-education as much as possible, that's kind of
And
thing.
you think that if more children were exposed to some kind of system that would allow them to understand the importance of education, you think that that would be very successful, that they would have an opportunity to sort of teach themselves?
Yes, and in that area, Dr. Haney, being that I study what is called embryo ethnograph, how the unborn child is affected by the environment, I believe that medical records could be used greatly to help kids. Like, I suffered a neck injury, and I didn't know that the son before me had died from a neck injury. So getting into these areas, I think they're great teaching vehicles. As Dr. Jane Poussant said, that we got to go into prenatal. And then there's later children finch funds, how kids are being prepared in prenatal for prison. And I remember my pastor, the late Dr. Wes Harvey, as a lad, he used to say, before young folk got on drugs, Mom and Dad was already taking pills, And so it's in these areas where we have got to go in order to help the kids, because they've been imprinted by the womb was their first world. And I believe that it was Deborah Bloom, a woman who wrote a book about prenatal. And she said that the womb is the most influential environment in the world. And there's a lot to be learned there, and there's a lot that have not been learned there. And in the book of Paula Murphy Paul called Origins, she shares how the first 9 months of our lives shape and fit and imprints us for the rest of our lives. It is so in these areas.
And so that time in the womb is a very, very important and influential part of life itself.
Yes.
It's an extension of life. Life is extended after the womb, but the life starts really in the womb, not only the physical life, but
That's
the mental
right.
life as well. Is that what we're saying?
That's exactly right.
And of course, we're going to take this second commercial break.
Yes.
And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Gregory Taylor, who is a researcher and who has given us excellent information in reference to the ability of African Americans, not only African Americans, but the ability of people to be literate in terms of their own experiences. And so let's pick up Professor Taylor, at some of the information that we've already talked about, and to give you the last 8 or 10 minutes to sort of expand upon your own experiences and sort of enlighten our audience in terms of the importance of children, well, those who are not literate, the importance of them becoming literate.
Yes, sir. Dr. Haney, I would say I've lived with what I call a constant Q&A system. Constantly questioning myself, asking myself questions. I remember when I was in school in the junior college, I started off in junior college, and I used to question myself as to why I could only write so much on a page and things of this nature. What was going on there? But question was coming to my mind about things that were in my memory that I had not investigated, and questions about my existence. Why was I here? Why did my mother and father have me, or what brought them together? And my mother told me that she was suffering from malnutrition when she was carrying me. And she also let me know that I was unwanted. She had lost a son before me, so I was basically had to help my father get over the son that he lost. And so after hearing both sides of the story, I sided with my mother, which had made me sensitive to women concerns. And I used to tell my mother, because she suffered from malnutrition, that I said, whatever you can recall when you were pregnant with me that you can share with me, I said, that would help me function better in America, you know. And that is one of the things that she used to do. A lot of times I would do it when we would sit down to breakfast. I would ask her if there was anything that she remembered, you know. And so these were things that I would do. And I've had some very unusual experiences here, but relying heavily on the mother. And I also have often thought that we have behavior in terms of me suffering, my mother suffering from malnutrition, and how it affected me. I offered my experiences to the Tennessee State and Johns Hopkins University, where they're doing something in the area of neuroscience and how math and things like that affect a child growing up, according to how the mother's diet was and things like that. I felt I had experiences in here to help. And also I have been one to believe that no matter what language you spoke, the better you can get an understanding of yourself, I felt it would automatically affect your ability to speak. And in areas where people are not speaking correctly, to me, they have not learned how to say what it is they need to talk about because they have not found out what that is themselves. And you can't even tell yourself who you are if you don't know who you are, you know. And so all these things, you know, coming together. Also, one of the things that come to my mind that I heard when I got to Nashville, and that was Dr. Reeves Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell said that one of his quotes was that the Negro has not been educated till you educate him in his music. So Dr. Haney right there brings a lot together for me to say, because in the area of music, if he had not been educated until you educate him in his music, I think about the ways we have used our music. You know, and I think about what Dr. W.E. Du Bois said, that the old spirituals are the greatest gift that the Negro has given to America, and also the most neglected. And I believe that if we're going to deal with this particular area, I think that it even should be what I call a Du Bois tax, a tax on all of those who have made it big in the music industry that are people of color. I think that they owe something to our orphans, we owe something to our seniors, the elderly, those who are suffering from dementia. You know, all of these things have been affected. So a couple of elderly people telling me the other day how they are witnessing their church being taken over because of the miseducation in the area of the music, you know. And so all of these things are coming together. And then there's one other biggie, I call it, May 17, 1954. That should have been our first National Education Day. A lot of people don't know that. And in the book, Christian Activism, I think it's on page 789 and 790 or something like that, it speaks how May 17th should have been our first national education holiday. This was the coming together of Brown versus the Board of Education. That's right. And the National Baptist Convention and the NAACP was working on that, and they had come together, and Dr. Duke, who was one of Duke McCall, was president of Southern University, the seminary. He was one who said that he had never heard such a great idea of bringing together to make that a national education holiday. And Dr. Duke McCall just passed away here, I think, about a year and a half ago. He was in Florida, and I didn't even know, he was still alive. I try to connect with those who are like in their 90s and above, because they can give you a 3-year, 30-year period of the state of things that are going on, and so it is things like this. And I think basically I have mainly educated myself, through quotes and things of that nature, quotes that speak to now. One I remember at the Johns Hopkins Business School, it say, know the past, understand the present, and anticipate the future. And then there is 1955, Dr. Haney, where a lot of people went into the civil rights movement. And see, this is another area of education. When I first heard the voice of Dr. MLK Jr. in the early 60s, I said, this man's life is going to be in the way of me growing up. Now, that's surprising for a lot of people to hear. That was in the early 60s. So what I did, I avoided his speeches. I did not listen to his speeches. A lot of people don't believe that. But I didn't. I chose not to educate myself in becoming. I feel that I didn't have to become who he was. I was already someone within myself. And my great-grandfather was a full-blood Choctaw Indian. And he told my mother to always keep me in school because there was something in me. And that has been a motivator for me when I lived in different cities to go to the universities, take in the lectures and listen and question and things of that nature, And so this is just a lot of things that I believe and have experienced.
Over the last 3 minutes here,
Yes.
we have researcher.
Yes.
What would you say to mothers or parents this morning who find themselves faced with the possibility of dealing with their children who are not reading up to capacity or whatever the situation? What can they do?
Well, I would share with the mothers, as I tell the mothers in my family, I said, the more you could share with your children about what you remember when you were carrying them, the more they will be able to function better in this society. And I believe that. And even Dr. Haney, sometimes when the police stop me or something, I try to answer all the police questions before they ask me anything, drop my bag and everything, and then I'll tell them, officer, I'm trying to learn how to live in America and adjust to this changing world. Is there anything you could say to help me, And the last part is this, Dr. Haney. When I was in Atlanta, I met a man who, I didn't know what supply and demand was. And I met a man who knew, I told him that I had discovered it through the definition of the late J. Paul Getty. And he said, find something that is hard to get, that is hard to find, that people have a great need for, package it, and the rest is history. And at this time, I had written my book, Unrefined Thoughts for Thinking for Learning. And he told me, he said that a Getty type of man comes along every century because there's something that the world is in need of, that their life is to bring. And that has been one of the motivating sources for me also to make that connection. And I believe in using the birthday. Like I recently discovered that the first issue of Forbes magazine, I share a birthday with that. And the Welch School over here, which is for sale, I share a birthday with the Welch School. And I would love to have that school, if in some way possible, to apply the vision that the Lord has given me, to help make America a safe and sound place, These are the things I say because it's all connected. And last, Dr. Haney, I've been emailing President Obama about creating a good customer service department in the American government. Because the late CEO of Coca-Cola said, good customer service is America's future, and we must do everything as if America's future depend on it, because it really does, and God's in the detail. And it would be an honor for the late, Guzzetti, Roberto Guzzetti, over Coca-Cola, to honor him with naming a customer service department in his honor, because that's his quote, from what I understand.
Very good. And let me thank you, researcher Taylor, for bringing by that excellent information, and
Thank
especially the various aspects of the whole idea of making people familiar with how reading can be taught and some of the outcomes dealing with your own personal experiences. And let me thank you for that.
Yes.
And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. Thank you and welcome to the show for today. The topic this morning is African American history at the 21st century. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the African American history experience, Dr. E. Kelly Sanford from Tennessee State University. And of course, Dr. Sanford, you've been with us on many, many occasions, and you've given us such excellent information. And let me welcome you to the show this morning. And let's start off by having you to give us some information in reference to your background, your education, and your experiences. And then we'll get into some other aspects of African American history, the African American history experience at the 21st century as far as the African American History Month is concerned. Let's start with that. And I think, as you know, it did not start as African American History Month, but so let's do it from that perspective after we talk about your background, education, and your experience.
Absolutely, and thank you so much again for having me here. I'm Dr. E. Kelly Sanford, and as you said, I'm a professor of sociology at Tennessee State University. I started in reverse. I did a postdoc education at Penn State University and State College, Pennsylvania, in gerontology and evaluation research. Did my doctorate degree, very proud of, at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And there I also worked with the national headquarters of the American Red Cross, doing HIV/AIDS education research and evaluation unit there. Kind of interesting because right here in Nashville with Dr. Ed Sullivan, there's a first response center, and I worked with Dr. Jackie Fleming on that project here, and that stemmed from that earlier work in Washington, D.C. Also worked with the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives in Washington, D.C. That was an excellent experience. Did my undergraduate work at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. As also, I was at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan, and that was a wonderful educational experience. But as I look back on that time at Howard University, with Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday becoming a holiday, I was at all of the protests from the time Stevie Wonder started it to the time that it finally went into fruition with the President Reagan of all people to make it come to be a birthday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And so, excuse me, in a real sense, that was really an addition to the African American historical experience, as well as African American History Month or African American History Week. Let's look at some of the things that, when you think about the African American history experience or the concept of African American History Month, let's say something about that in the last couple of minutes that we have here.
Okay, and very good. We have to give credit to Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He was a noted scholar who was the second African American to graduate from Harvard University, received his first 2 degrees from the University of Chicago, but was born in Virginia, whose father was a slave. So he had the foresight and insight to know that there was a need to talk about and to put into record, into concrete within the system of America, that are the contributions that African Americans had made from slavery to freedom to the present. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the founder of what was called then African American History Week. And he put it on the time that he said it should be the second week in February because it was a unique birthday time of Frederick Douglass as well as Abraham Lincoln. So he thought that that would be a good time to celebrate it, since Abraham Lincoln, of course, supposed with the Emancipation Proclamation and Civil War 1861-1865, ended slavery and brought about those constitutions to abolish it. And Frederick Douglass, of course, was in the forefront of helping that decision to be made. So he found that that was a wonderful time to try to celebrate it. And as I recall coming up as a youth in school, it seemed like it was a day, although he had African American, what they called at that time Black History Month. It seemed like it was a one-day thing. And then it grew from one day to a week, and then from a week to African American History Month as we celebrate it today.
Very good. You know, looking back over that experience, that is the establishment of, how did people react to that? African Americans especially.
Yeah, well, I think it was a time of celebration, a time of wanting to have that pride. But I think the problem was, and as Dr. Carter G. Woodson wrote in his book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro, he felt that not only did African Americans did not know about the history and contributions, that also the majority group didn't either. So he felt, I think, as a primary thesis of the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, that it would bring a certain sense of pride to that group to know about the history, to know the contributions that they made to the American culture, and that from that point on, when that African American History Week was founded, that it would grow and grow and grow, and that people would have a certain sense of pride. But I think ultimately he had wanted to become a part of the institution of education, from elementary school to junior high to high school, that people would learn about it, and then would be celebratory for all different ethnic groups throughout the United States.
Very good. Let's stop here, and we're going to have our first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The guest is Dr. E. Kelly Sanford from Tennessee State University, a sociologist at Tennessee State University, and he's given us some information in reference to African American History Month at the 21st century. During the first segment, he gave us quite a bit of information in reference to the establishment of the African American History Week that would eventually become African American History Month. And so, Dr. Sanford, let's pick up where we left off the last time and give you an opportunity during the second segment to explore this whole idea of African American history at the 21st century.
Okay. Well, as then, I think even now, there's a great importance to still research, to have out there within the educational system the contributions that have been made by African Americans. We can look back over the earlier time period from 1619 with slavery for 244 years, 81 years of Jim Crow laws, leading to Reconstruction, and then from that time period into the Civil Rights Movement, and how those advances really contributed to the greatness of America. And I think when Dr. Carter G. Woodson founded that, he wanted everyone, not only African Americans, but everyone within the American ethos, within the American culture, to know about the contributions that were made, really, to the economic development of the American society. When you think of human beings being snatched from their homeland and brought over as an economic institution, enslaved for hundreds of years, it was really the foundation of this economy. And so we have to look at that as an institution. And that institution helped founded what we have today. When we look at certain things on our tires, driving around with a Goodyear or the Vanderbilts and other types of companies, many of those funds came out of the backs of the African Americans that were indeed slaves during an earlier time period of how the economy was. And of course, there was a war that took place from 1861 to 1865. More people were killed in order to maintain enslavement at that time period than any other war with those that have been dead since that time. It's an interesting phenomenon because sometimes when we think about those contributions that we made, and he had the book that was entitled The Miseducation of the Negro, he wanted some accurate information to be talked about those contributions. And he felt that that would bring a certain sense of pride to a group of people in the redefinition of themselves as they move forth from the time of slavery to now, and he felt that that education would help. I would like to try to make a comment on the notion that how it was important then, but even most important now in the 21st century, because in many instances that whole idea of the miseducation has not come into full fruition because it has been misconstrued. It hasn't really been a history that has been forthright in all of the textbooks, from elementary school to junior high school to high school, for parents to then reinforce it at home, for the school systems to reinforce it in projects and in a large way. Although we live in the 21st century and we can Google Dr. Carter G. Woodson and a large amount of information would just come up about him, but if you don't know about him, then you won't have the insight to even Google him, to know him. But so it's important, I think, for us to still bring that into our projects in school so people will have a sense of pride about it. There are a lot of different documentaries. But it's sad to say, as we look at the Generation X in the 1980s, born during that time, or the millennium groups that's born in the 90s to the present. And I did mention at the outset, but in 1985, I was one of 25 scholars that were invited to Harvard University. And there we talked about that millennium group. And we said that they would be born and they would not have any insight as to what was going on during the '60s movement that would have given them the freedom that they have today in our present society. Now, as we think about African American History Month, I think that was the central problem probably Dr. Carter G. Woodson was having with conversations with other scholars at that time. Well, how do we bring some insight to people about what had happened for hundreds of years prior to a time of the brink of the 20th century that then we needed to know about?
And the impact that it has upon the 20th century itself.
Absolutely. And without that information, he said we'll be misinformed, miseducated. So he felt that that was an important thesis in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, that it would bring information, insight, pride, a willingness to want to be able to share with succeeding generations. So the question becomes, in an evaluative way, to what degree has that succeeded or not? And we were in '85 at Harvard University at the Du Bois Center. W.B. Du Bois, who was the first African-American to graduate from Harvard, and Dr. Carter G. Woodson was the second. You know, here you are thinking in terms of a new group of people that wasn't even born at that time, and they would not recognize it. And as a professor, I'm finding that to come very true, and I think it's probably that way throughout the United States. Now, this problem isn't just for African Americans. I think it is for the majority group as well. And I think he didn't want it to be just for just that one group to understand it, but he felt that that was at the core, but he wanted everyone to appreciate it. Therefore, we had this whole revolution with the diversity in higher education, where certainly the curriculum would be a little bit more enhanced to have the histories of all ethnic groups to be included versus excluded within the curriculum, so that there would be an appreciation. Now, the larger notion of that is looking at it sociologically as how we are made up of different institutions. And so you would think our government and people that will make it up will be a bit more understanding and sensitive to issues related